Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. Open and honest discussions with wise and skillful teachers about their experiences with life, death, and Buddhism. If you wonder how others on the path have dealt with death and dying and grief, then be sure to listen in. Everybody has a story, a perspective, and a valuable lesson to share. Embrace death, live a full life, and learn how to love impermanence. Because as my dear father used to say, nobody gets out of this alive. Hi, and welcome today on the Death Dhamma podcast. I have a conversation with Diane Wilde, which I almost wanted to call Two Widows Talking, but that's a different show. And really, it's not about the fact that we are both widows, but it is about shared experiences. And before we jump in, because Diane does an excellent job introducing herself, there are two things that I would like to share with you before we begin today. First, this was one of my earlier podcasts that I recorded, and I tell you that because I was still learning, as I still am, about some things with sound quality, and you will notice that there is a difference between when you hear my voice and Diane's, more so than I think in past episodes. And I did have an engineer work on it and decided to use it because I was hoping that the value of the discussion would overcome some of my learning curve challenges with podcasting. So thank you for your patience with that. And the other thing I want to remind you is the book, Sitting with Death, Buddhist Insights to Help You Calm Your Fears and Live a Peaceful Life, is coming out in September. And a great way to keep track of that is, of course, to stay here with me on the Death Dhamma podcast, but also visit margaretmeloni.com and sign up, because people who are on the list when the book launches are going to receive a free audio chapter from the book. And I've also started creating 14 days of, I call them Sit With This. In other words, 14 days of thoughts on death, grieving, and Buddhism. And so without further ado, here we go. Thanks for being here.
Before I just start peppering you with questions, I wonder if you would share with us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I am a ordained Buddhist chaplain and minister, and that happened actually only about 5 years ago. I've been studying Buddhism most of my life, but got really serious probably about 25 years ago when I realized Buddhism really had the answers for so many of just our common living situations.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I teach is based on the three practices that the Buddha said were essential. And the first one is anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, how we start our lives, taking a breath. And the second one is metta, which I think is how we should live our lives, with open friendliness to all living beings. And the last practice is maranasati, mindfulness of death, which doesn't get much play, in Buddhism as well as in our contemporary culture. Yet the Buddha placed as much emphasis on that as he did on anapanasati and metta. Yeah.
Okay.
I had been teaching in a number of prisons. Right now, there is no going in due to COVID. And I also am a teacher at Sacramento Insight Meditation.
Okay.
And we're located in the Sacramento Dharma Center in Sacramento.
When did you first develop an understanding of death in your life as a reality? Like, I think people know there's death, but there's knowing there's death, and then there's really understanding the experience. Oh, there's death. I will die. People will die. It's not just this intangible thing. This is real. When was your first real understanding of death?
I was very fortunate in that when I was about 8 or 9 years old, one of my dear friends died of a heart condition. And he was 7 or 8. His name was Joey Kavanaugh. This is back in Verona, New Jersey.
Oh.
And the parents were grieving horribly, and none of my friends wanted to go to the funeral, and their parents didn't want them to go. I'm 73. This is back, when you just didn't talk about death. You certainly didn't talk about the death of a child. And I told my mother I wanted to go visit the Kavanaughs. I felt bad for them, and I wanted to see Joey. And they just lived 3 houses down the street, and I walked down. He was in his little casket in a white suit and holding rosary beads. There was a wake going on. And I remember so clearly, like it was yesterday, Mrs. Kavanaugh hugging me and saying, "Thank you so much for coming to say goodbye to Joey." And I looked at him, and he looked beautiful, and I just got over a fear of death. Just, okay,
by
this
going
is what
to
happens
see
to all of us. And I've carried that with me my entire life. I've always been willing to be with the dying. I have no problem talking about it, to the consternation of my parents when I was younger. So it's always been a comfortable subject for me. And unfortunately, like you, I am also a widow. And my husband was diagnosed with a terminal illness 20 years ago. And at the same time, my oldest son was sentenced to prison.
Oh, wow.
So I went through a heavy-duty grief.
Yes.
I'm losing my husband, and I'm losing my eldest son. And my husband lasted for about 10 years. He had, essentially, it was liver cancer. When he died, I was able to be with that and be with the grief afterwards, thankfully for Buddhist practice.
Okay.
And investigating grief and having people I could talk to about grief and what to do. And I got such good advice and such great support. And I think it was one of the most important lessons of my life.
Wow. Can you share with us what allowed you to be with grief and maybe some of the practices that helped you and some of the things that you learned in Buddhism and things that people said and did along the way that allowed this? Because everyone goes through grief and everyone goes through grief differently, but I don't know that everyone can just be with grief in the way in which you're saying it.
It certainly wasn't immediate. As my husband was dying and he was in the hospital and I started crying, he said, "Buddhists don't cry."
I don't remember reading that.
Hysterically funny.
Yes,
Buddhists cry. And we laughed, and that was actually the last conversation we had. And when he died, I talked about this with my group today because we were talking about euthanasia. And he had a DNR.
Okay.
And he went into cardiac arrest. And fortunately, my youngest son was there. And the doctors and nurses said, "We can save him. Should we?"
Ouch.
And this is not the question.
No, they shouldn't do that to you.
They shouldn't.
Right.
In fact, in my class today, I have 2 doctors, who are both kind of shaking their heads. But they did ask, and they said, "We can save him." And I'm so glad my youngest son was there. He was grief-stricken as well, but he said, no, he made it very clear he is done with this body. He does not want to come back. And so they let him go. And I missed him tremendously and went through grief. I found I could not maintain my sitting practice, and I talked to Gil Fronsdell, who was still my teacher. And I said, when I sit, the grief is just overwhelming. All I can do is see Larry as he's dying, and I miss him so much. And Gil said, then you shouldn't be sitting right now. What you should do is just get back into your body. You need to walk. And just walk. And that was exactly what I needed to do. I was so out of my body and in my head with grief that, I was just in this maelstrom of mental stuff going on, and I couldn't find any way out of it. But walking helped tremendously. And gradually, as I got back into my body and could feel my body, I sat, and Gil said, okay, now investigate grief. Where exactly is it? Investigate it like you would a scientist. And I started getting very interested in it. When grief would come up, where is it? And I found it was in my throat.
Oh.
And apparently that happens to a lot of people. A lot of people found that's where grief seems to be. I thought it'd be in my heart, but it was in my throat. And I got really, really interested in it, watching it come into fruition and then fade away, and what was happening. And as I got more and more interested, the grief seemed to fade as grief. It just became another phenomena.
Oh, interesting.
It was extremely interesting. And while, as you know, you're a widow, the scar never goes away.
True.
But it becomes livable. You know, it's just another facet of your being and your experience. And you can go on.
I had a same experience, and at first I felt a little guilty because I couldn't sit, or let me say that when I sat, it was just a big, drenching, racking, sobbing fest. And there's nothing wrong with crying, but I know that when I was doing that, I wasn't really meditating. And, you know, like you said, I could walk around and cry anywhere. And like you, absolutely, it was right in that throat. It was, some days I felt like somebody had punched me in the throat. So that is so interesting. Yeah. And I just had to give myself permission to not meditate until it was time to meditate. But I did. I went through kind of this, like, what the hell? What kind of Buddhist are you, Margaret? Like, in your deep, darkest moment, you can't use. But wow, so that's so interesting.
Yeah, well, we are. I know I'm not. Maybe you are. I'm not an enlightened being. I can't just sit when these heavy emotional experiences take place. But I'm glad there's tools that we can use until we can sit and be with whatever's taking place.
Absolutely.
And so I have used that so many times with people I mentor, when they can't sit. Go take a walk in nature. Just get out. Get in your body. Feel what the body feels like when it's at ease. Notice that. And then come back to sitting.
Right, when the timer is right. How long?
When the time is right.
Do you remember how long was it before you were able to sit? I'm just curious.
It's a good question, and I knew you were going to ask it. And as you remember, time lost all meaning.
True.
I couldn't tell you one day from the next. I think maybe a month or two, probably, something like that.
Yeah.
But that's a guess, because it just all the days flooded into each other, and,
You're right about the time thing. It's like you just go, one foot in front of the other, get up, get dressed, comb your hair, do the thing you have to do. Take a pajama day once in a while if you need to. Don't take too many pajama days or you need to call for help.
With this COVID thing, I'm taking lots of pajama days. I'm wearing pajama bottoms right now.
That's awesome. Why not? Yeah,
I have on tops and pajama bottoms.
Right. Well, because our whole Zoom way of living, it's like we're all pretty up above, and pajama bottoms or sweatpants down below.
That's right.
Yeah, although there's some people that forget the pajama bottoms and sweatpants, and those always make some interesting news stories. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Was there anything that surprised you about your experience with dealing with death and grief and dying?
Yes. I was amazed at how more compassionate I became.
Oh, tell me about that.
I practiced metta, as a good Buddhist, and I thought I did it diligently, but it wasn't until I experienced that, complete total grief myself that I really felt I was practicing it for others. Knowing others experience this too. Other people, other sentient beings are going through this too. They too will face death. And it made my metta practice just so much richer and relevant. And I just feel I became a much more compassionate, kind person due to my husband's death.
Okay. I think that makes sense. My mom, who wasn't a Buddhist, when my dad died, I know my mother became a lot more compassionate to her friends who had already lost their husbands.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and because I think it was the thing she knew was a thing that could happen, but it hadn't happened to her yet. And I think with some as we get older, with some people, you were a younger widow, but as some people have become widows in their 80s, I think there's some of this, like, I still have my husband kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think my mom had that attitude a little bit. And then, that became not true. And then she reached out to the other widows and started, including them things and socializing in things, because in some groups of people, the widows become outcasts, so to speak. And,
no, it's true.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Experience it yourself. As a couple, it's one thing, but as a single person, it's not comfortable for couples to include you.
Yeah.
And so, you might see the wife on occasion, but it's not the same.
No.
It's never the same.
They don't know what to do with us.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of women are worried that you want to take on their husband now that you don't have one.
Yes. Yes, that is still a thing. I was shocked at that. I thought, oh, come on, ladies. Is this still a thing? But it's still a thing. I'm like, I don't want your husband.
Exactly. In fact, I've had this discussion with dear friends, my bubble group of, 4 other women.
Mm-hmm.
None of us have any desire to ever be married again.
Okay. There you go.
And the reason is, and it certainly is true with me, I had a wonderful relationship for 34 years with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, and he was one of a kind. And no, I'm not going to do that again, because all I would be looking for is him.
Oh, yes. And he was one of a kind, like you said, one of a kind.
One of a kind. He was funny and hysterical and was a terrific father. He was just, I loved being with him. We had so many adventures. I would never find that again. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to even try.
And look at the last thing that he did for you. He made you laugh.
Mm-hmm.
You say, he was hysterically funny. And that was, with his last energy, he made you laugh. That's amazing.
He made people in the emergency room laugh. In fact, I think that's why they said we could save him.
Aww.
He had them in stitches.
Aww.
And until he just went into cardiac arrest, and they were laughing. One of them came and said, "You have the coolest guy that you are married to. This is so much fun."
Mm-hmm.
And I think he influenced them, and that's why they said we can save him.
Sure, because they're like, we don't want to. They got attached.
That's right.
They got attached.
Loved him just like I did, and in fact, the doctor, angry guy, came out crying and said, "I'm so sorry." And I said, "This is what he wanted. He was done with the body."
Yeah, it's time. It's time.
It's time.
So you were Buddhists together, you and your husband?
No, my husband was not. He was more like a fellow traveler, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Call it.
Uh-huh.
He appreciated my Buddhist practice. We talked about Buddhism, but he did not believe in any kind of spiritual tradition. He was just him.
Awesome. That's great. Now, if you were to describe grief to a friend who had never experienced grief like this, what would you say?
I think I would say it's an experience of the heart being so full it breaks.
Oh.
So full of love and so full of grief, it just can't contain anymore, and it breaks.
And then, does it ever come back together again?
Of course.
Yeah.
It has to. We're alive and it comes back together, but that breaking, I think, puts us in touch with all sentient beings. That's what I was talking about. I feel much more compassionate and kind to all other beings, since that took place. It was like my heart finally understood, what every living being goes through. Yeah. And so I was just filled with compassion and knowing we're all going to deal with this, every one of us. There's no getting out of it. That's true.
That's the thing my dad, one of his jokes used to be, just kind of, because for a while my dad had lung cancer, which was what he died from, but we had that false sense of security. He looked good and he was able to do things, but he was terminal. And so every once in a while he would just look and he'd crack a smile. And he'd go, remember, no one gets out of this alive.
That's right.
And it was, I feel like it was just his way of saying, look, this is great today. And today we can take a road trip, but I'm still dying, and we're all still dying. It's just so much more obvious.
The statement that birth is a terminal illness.
There you go. Right?
And that so resonates. Yeah, we're all dying constantly. Some of us die before others. That's the only difference, but we're all going to die. I had an experience with I have 3 stepchildren. My husband was married at 16 for a year or 2 years and had children.
Wow.
Anyway, I became friends with them, and I love them tremendously. One of them, Rebecca, her husband Ben was dying also of lung cancer, and I saw what a difference it was when you have such difficulty accepting death. Ben was close to the end. I was visiting him all the time, spending time with him. He didn't want to talk about death, and he was about a week or two away from death, and I was trying to get him to really talk about how he was feeling. I'm thinking in terms of karma, your attitude,
right?
Being honest with yourself. And he said, Diane, I could live another 20 years.
And what did you say?
And I thought, oh my gosh, he died a week later. And to not accept that, I just thought, I just felt such sorrow for him.
I do too.
Yeah, he was in such denial that, your life is ending too, just like everybody else's will end.
When you said that, and what my immediate thought was, gosh, I hope he died peacefully in his sleep, so he kind of didn't know what was happening. That was my thought.
That was the problem. He had terminal agitation.
Oh.
He was so upset that he was dying. In fact, my stepdaughter and I had to take him literally to a hospice center because we could not control him. He was so agitated.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is, somebody who just won't accept the fact that he's dying. So I think for me, he was another great lesson on accepting death now while we can, and studying it, and as the Buddha said, reciting the 5 recollections every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And getting comfortable with it because, this is what's going to happen. And in my class, the goal of the class is to be comfortable with death, but also to enjoy life to the fullest. And you can only do that by being comfortable with death, and then planning for your own funeral and service and what you want to leave behind.
So out of curiosity, in this class you're teaching A Year to Live, how many people in the class are taking it just to take it as opposed to I'm taking it because I have been diagnosed with something?
The majority have not been diagnosed with anything.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. This is the 5th time I've taught it, and I have had people who have been terminally ill, and it was a pleasure, being with them and their honesty and their feelings. This class, the only person that is close right now that I know of was the guy who had COVID, and he's recovered from it. But otherwise, no, people are taking it because I've given many talks in Sacramento Insight Meditation on the importance of Maranasati and making death a part of your life that you're comfortable with. So I always get I've got 23 people in this class, and that's the largest I've had. Next time I teach it, it's going to be smaller and much more intimate.
And what is the hardest thing? Because I think you go through kind of a planned agenda. And what do you observe most students find to be the most difficult part of that course?
It might have been today when we were talking about euthanasia.
Okay.
And how people felt about it. And we were talking about an article by Dr. Emmanuel. You might have read it. He wrote it when he was, I think, 60. And he said, at 75, I hope I die with a body that's in good shape and I don't have to suffer sickness.
Okay.
I wonder how he feels when he's 75 and still feeling good. And he said, it's an open-ended question on since California has the right to die legislation, when the time is, fortunately, there's so many prerequisites, with 6 months, 2 doctors, a therapist, deciding that you have the right to die, that it's not something you can just do automatically with a doctor's help.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was the discussion today, and it was a very good discussion. People had a lot to say about that.
I can see that that's a difficult discussion. And, I will say that before my husband ever became ill, just in general conversation, something he would always say is, if I ever find out I'm terminally ill, I'm going to go someplace where euthanasia is allowed, and I'm going to just take charge, and I'm going to just do it. And I will say in that conversation, I was the one who became upset. And when his time came, when he was diagnosed and he was terminal, I broached the subject because I said, I remember this is what you said. And he said, no. He changed his mind. He says, no. And he says, and he says, my saying no isn't because I think there's a miracle and I'm going to live. He says, my saying no is I believe that it's not mine to take charge. I'm going to see my karma through. But it is a difficult topic.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And in bringing it up to him, I remember I was so nervous and I was like, my job is to give him the death that he wants to have and to be with him through whatever he decides. But no, he was a non-starter. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to see my karma through. And, and I'd say that to say that was his choice and with no judgment on other people's choices.
No, and actually that's what most people say. They'd like to know that option is there, but actually taking advantage of it. I did some research on it between 2016 when it was passed and just up to 2018. Less than 1,000 people took advantage of it.
See, I guess it is. It's about maybe knowing that you have that power.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's knowing that you're not trapped. You're not trapped.
Exactly. If you're in a body that is just horribly painful and you only have a couple months to live and this is how it's going to be, I think that would have some relief to know I can get a doctor to help me out here. My own dad, my dad died of heart disease, and he had gone through 2 major, operations, and he wanted to die. And he read the book Last Exit. Okay. And he asked me if I would help him. Yeah. This is 1998. I said yes, although I prayed that I wouldn't be asked to. I just wanted to set his mind at ease that I would be there and I would help him. And fortunately, shortly after he asked me that, he died of a heart attack in his sleep, and he died with a smile on his face.
Oh, that's the best death.
That is the best. He knew he was dying. He knew he didn't have to do all these plastic bags over your head and all the stuff that they say in Last Exit. I have the book myself. And my mother said she found him with a smile on his face. She didn't know he was dead because he looked so pleased. That's lovely. That is lovely. It's perfect.
Yeah, that is. May we all have that. This topic came up in another way with someone else I talked with when we talked about during the AIDS pandemic. And he talked about going to parties with friends and knowing that this was their last hurrah. It was planned, and they had this great final exit party. I don't think they called them that, and that they knew when they said goodbye that friend was now going to take their life because they'd been diagnosed with AIDS, and they decided that this is how they wanted to take charge, have this great blowout with their friends, and then be gone.
I think that's actually my husband talked about doing that as well. And kind of like your husband, it just never happened.
Right.
He wanted to live, but he was in such pain. He didn't want to live. It's kind of the duality, I think.
It is. Boy, yeah. Talk about the duality of things. Yeah. Okay, so we did talk about how, Gil Fronsdale helped you and when you couldn't meditate, and he said walk, and then eventually you were able to go back to meditating. And Metta helped you. Was there anything else that you found helpful that you want other people to know about?
I think having people around where you can be completely vulnerable with them and not put on a facade of the brave widow.
I know that one. I tell us.
I think we all.
Yeah, I guess we all do. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not fine. How the hell do you think I'm fine?
That's it. You described it. You described exactly what I was going to say. That's it.
Okay, sorry.
To have you know it. And to have those few people, and there's usually, and sometimes you're surprised. Who are the people that show up? It's like a friend of mine said, when you die, you might be surprised who's with you at the end. And I love that statement because I think it's true. And I think the same thing is when you go through grief. I have had a number of people I was close to saying, I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I just didn't know how to handle it. Did you have that?
Absolutely. Or they just wouldn't talk to me, or they just avoided it, or they just wouldn't see you for maybe a couple of months, and then they would talk to you in a couple of months as if nothing had happened. And in that scenario, I understood that my role, or here's what I thought, here's what I put on myself. My role was to just let them be and not remind them.
That's all you can do, because, that's their journal.
Yes.
And they have to figure out how they're going to handle it. But the, wonderful people who are with you and allow you to cry and what am I going to do? And all of that, they're a blessing to just sit with, because they can't solve anything, but they're willing to just sit there and listen to you.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but it really taught me to stay away from meaningless phrases. And I understand that I know in my past I was guilty of using meaningless phrases. And now I just realize that you can just say, I'm sorry, and hug,
That's all you need. Just knowing someone is there and willing to be in your presence while you're so vulnerable and you're suffering, and not walk away, which most people do. And I think as I'm saying this, that was another gift from Larry's death, is I am more than willing to be with people as they're suffering and they're dying, or they have lost people that have died. I want to be there.
Yeah.
I actually want to be with them.
Because you know that you can, and you know the importance. It's like those people who have a fear of hospitals and they can't visit people who are sick. Well, you and I, we don't have that anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't have that.
I mean, talk about freedom. To be able to, can you visit me because my husband is dying and this and that? And yes, absolutely. I'll be right there. And you can't solve anything.
No.
There's nothing to be done other than sit with them and let them be. That's it.
I think sometimes, I guess, I feel a little better because I think I can't do anything other than be here. But I know statistically, ultimately, this person will come through it.
Yes.
They just have to do it on their schedule. Some people don't. Some people never come back from grief. But statistically, I think I can look at somebody and go, I know this is going to be really hard for him or her, but I know they will come through it eventually.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think having that knowledge and that presence, I think, is a comfort to people. You don't have to say anything. They know you've gone through it. They know that you're okay. They can speak to you. And I think that's the best gift we can give people who are also going to deal with losing their loved ones and losing their own lives.
Yeah, maybe that's the best message. Absolutely. Is there anything else you would like to share with others about navigating death and grief? And
the only other thing, and this is probably not a positive message, but in prison, people are losing their parents all the time and they can't be there. And this has been a real practice for me on how to be of comfort to them. And so I've come up with a little ritual, talking with them, and I've told them, listen, you couldn't be there, but, consciousness, we don't know exactly what it is. We don't know exactly how it plays out. So talk to them now. Tell them how you feel now. Recite a mantra for them right now. Just do it like they're right there. And I think they hear you. And so that's what we do. And have a little service, and it does help them feel much better.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. I mean, and this is great for our men and women in prison, because this comes up, and it's great for us going through COVID, where people can't be with their with their loved ones, or if you're around the globe and it's not during a pandemic, but you're around the globe and you couldn't get to your person. I think you can always. I'm not shy about saying talk to your dead people. I'm not shy about it at all.
No, I still talk, and I bet you do too to your husband.
I do. Yes, I do. Sometimes he's probably like, oh, would you give it a rest?
Yes, I think the same thing. My husband can find anything. I am forever losing keys, phones, everything. And he was just one of those people that, okay, did you look here? And he'd find it. I swear, I lose something and I'll say, Larry,
where is it?
Where is it? I find it.
See?
Absolutely. All of a sudden it just, okay, did you look here? And I swear there is some consciousness that really picks up on that. Absolutely.
It definitely. What was it? One time after Ed had been gone, I thought I had gotten all his reading glasses, and I looked up one day, and there on top of the TV cabinet were a pair of his glasses. And I mean, I'm like, where did those come from? And okay, thanks. Because I was donating them, and I guess I had forgotten a pair. So I'm like, okay, thanks. And I must have looked at them a bazillion times.
Yep.
So absolutely.
I think there's just wonderful, unexplainable things that happen. I'll tell you this briefly. When my father died, who I talked about, we were having a memorial service for him, and my youngest son and my husband and I, this is 1998, were sitting in the living room, and the phone started making the weirdest noises I have ever heard. It wasn't ringing. It was like chirping and doing these weird things. I'd pick it up. There was static on it. I'd hang it up and it would start again. And my husband said, "It's your dad." And I actually somehow believe it probably was. I don't know how, but it never happened again. The phone was fine after that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Weird noises.
Absolutely. It's that. Did you ever see that? This is really going back. The original Twilight Zone. There is an episode where a woman's getting phone calls, and it's during a storm, and she keeps getting phone calls, and then like the repairman comes and says, "Oh, I'll get your phone service ready," and she says, "What do you mean?" I've had the phone this whole time, and it's of course it's Twilight Zone, so it's meant to make the hair on your neck stand up. And he says, "Oh no, the line went down over Smithfield Cemetery, and it's been down this whole time." And it was her dead husband calling her. So,
I love that.
Yeah, so there you go.
Well, have you had dreams of your husband?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
me too. Me too.
Definitely, and my mom and my dad too. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I actually, one of my dear friends, her name is Lama Ami Diller. She's a Zen priest as well as an ordained Lama. And I've talked to her about this. And she said, we don't know what's going on. There's so much happening that we're just so totally unaware of. And, Tibetans believe a lot in dreams. And the kind of advice they can give. And, shortly after my husband died, I had so many dreams of him, but the one that stood out was one where he was calling me on the phone, since we're talking on the phone. And I said, "Larry, how are you?" He goes, "Oh, I'm really good, but I have to talk quick. This is going to fade out."
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm saying, "So tell me, you're okay? Will I see you again?" He goes, yeah, it's fine. And he starts fading. He goes, "I'm sorry, but I can't talk. I'm fading out." And that was the end of the dream. I have had too many just absolutely wonderful dreams that are as real to me as, my talking to you right now. And so, I'm a firm believer we don't understand consciousness or exactly what it is or, how big it is.
That's how it is. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
maybe it doesn't matter if it's his ghost versus some kind of awareness, intuitive thing, right?
Or I think a lot too. What exactly is karma? And what does karma leave behind? And it could possibly be just exactly what we're talking about. Maybe that's an aspect of karma.
And that's a helpful part because in some traditions, if the idea is that some there's the bardo and some there's the no, rebirth is instant, and so if rebirth is instant, then is he stuck? And should I be upset? Should I be like, go? You need to go. You're not supposed to be here. But again, I generally just decided that I can't know that, and I'm not going to worry. And exactly like you said, is like we don't really understand everything. So.
Boy, that is very interesting because that was a topic in my Year to Live class. It was the Theravadan version of rebirth versus the Tibetan.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, there's an interesting sutta called the Paisa Sutta where they say, do you even know what time is?
Right. Do we?
What is instant rebirth?
That is a great question. Instant could be just, I hitch the next ride that comes along, but maybe that next ride isn't until 10 years human time.
Or 100 years.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's backwards, who knows? The whole sutta just goes into, do you really know what time is?
Yeah.
And I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it because we don't, time is something that we might not really be able to comprehend in this body, in this life.
Right. It's something we have to conveniently chunk up and divide up because that's how we can do it. It's a function of our capabilities and limitations.
Exactly. Fascinating topic.
Yeah, it really is. I'm just curious. Is there something you would have liked me to ask you that I haven't asked you? Or something that you would like to say that you haven't gotten to say? I know that's kind of a weird question, but I like to ask that.
I really can't think. I've shared with you more than I normally do, believe me, with even close friends. So, no, I think I've said everything that I can think about, death and grieving and, being in the world.
Oh, thank you. I know it's so helpful. Gosh, it's helpful to me, even at this stage, even 6 years out, it's still helpful to me to talk to you and go, oh, you too? Your throat too? Thank you. And so I know that this will be helpful to others. And this is the point is let's get I call it death awareness or death Dhamma, but let's get it out there.
This has been the Death Dhamma podcast with Margaret Meloni. Thank you for being here. Your reviews and comments are greatly appreciated. And please come find me on margaretmeloni.com. MargaretMeloni. And don't forget to check out Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless. Available in all your favorite formats over on Amazon. And most importantly, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be safe, at ease, and free from suffering. Bye for now.